The companies that emerge the other side as the big dominant companies, I hope they're going to be companies which are kind and they do things in the right way, because business done right is the way you solve the world's problems. And many people take the step back and go, what is it? It's got all the human capital, all the financial capital. That's how we should think about business.
What do you think needs to change about education fundamentally?
The notion or idea of an adult sitting in the front of a classroom and preaching and talking to 20 or 30 children who are going to write down the notes like good little people, that's just not how people learn. It's not how my children learn. It's not what people want to do, and the education system just hasn't evolved because schools and parents and children measure their success in the same old way. I don't get what I'm looking for. I want some grrr, I want some street fight, I want people who have learned some hard lessons, and that normally doesn't come out of formal structured education. The way capital markets invest and the time horizon over which people measure success and are incentivized is 100% wrong. And that needs to change. And until that changes, you will get companies behaving in the wrong way because they measure success in timelines which are too short. And you can't invest really for the future when you do that. It just doesn't work.
Which areas do you think, God, we might get disrupted here? I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit excited about my next guest. It's the CEO and co-founder of Octopus Group, Simon Rogerson. Octopus is a fascinating business, but I think really what sets Simon apart, what made him a really interesting person to interview, was how he thinks about the human component of businesses, the mission, doing things for the right reasons. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. It's one of my favorites. Simon, thank you very much for joining me today. Great. So I think most people know Octopus through Octopus Energy. It's the biggest energy company in the UK now. Congratulations. But actually Octopus has quite a diverse set of interests, doesn't it? Could you just give us a quick guided tour for anyone that doesn't know Octopus about the group?
Sure. Well, the mission is pretty simple. We invest in the people, the ideas and the industries that we think will change the world. Now, when I tell somebody I work for a company called Octopus, they just assume I work for the energy company because it has real scale now. It has about 7.5, 8 million customers in the UK. It has more than 10 million, including the international customers in 12 countries. The technology platform that powers Octopus Energy, called Kraken, has 70 million accounts in 27 countries. It's been an absolute rocket ship. And as you say, number one energy company in the UK, not just by numbers, by what customers think about it as well, very important to us. But that masks all the work that went into Octopus, from when we set it up, which was 25 years ago. We originally built an investments business, which is still around today. And the group now is in 3 sectors. So we're in financial services, where we have the investments business, which includes a real estate business, a ventures business. We have an Octopus Money business, which is coaching through to advice for people in the UK. We have Seckle, a custody technology platform, which I know you know. We have Amicable, which allows people to separate and get divorced without needing to use lawyers. And we have a business called Octopus Legacy, which does wills and probate and just trying to change the whole experience for families when a loved one dies. And we also have a education business, which is called Aurora, which is a special needs school business, which has 23 special needs schools and is growing relatively quickly. And they are 3 quite different sectors, but that's where Octopus will operate for the very long term. And when we think long term, I'd love to build a business that outlives me. We will always be a private company. I don't want to sell it. I don't want any new investors in the business. And we've kind of learned the hard way. What goes into building, I hope, what is quite a special business, which means a lot to the people working there and a lot to the customers we serve every day.
Those sectors are quite different. I mean, what caused you to pick those? Is it were those mission-driven objectives from the start, wanting to change society, or was that where you saw financial opportunity? Or
Well, okay, not financial opportunity. I think one follows the other, actually. But if you go back to the mission, so investing in the people, the ideas, and the industries that will change the world, we could argue about it, but the number one societal problem is climate change. And Octopus Energy is leading the energy transition globally now. I think it will make green energy cheaper and faster for hundreds of millions of customers. Financial services, actually, the population needs a whole lot of help in that space. It's the number one cause of mental health problems in the UK is money. And I think people's relationship and understanding of money just isn't there. 25 years ago, financial services was the least trusted sector in the world. You fast forward 25 years, it's still the least trusted sector in the world, and for good reason. Energy is the second least trusted sector in the world, and then education is a personal bugbear. I don't think schools or universities prepare children or young adults for the future. and make them successful in life. So we all learn roughly the same things at school, but it doesn't teach us about our physical health, our mental health, relationships, what happens when a loved one dies, how to make yourself ready for work, mortgages, planning, entrepreneurship, all the things that I think people would do well to understand and learn. And we've started in special needs schools, but I'd love the business and the group to have a broader business within the field of education. So they're quite different, but when I wake up in the morning, we're really proud of those businesses, and I think they can help to make the world a better place, which fundamentally I think should be the role of business.
My background is most in fintech, but I'd like to touch on that educational component because I actually have a son that's autistic, and that was very eye-opening to me because it highlights how completely different people are. He's very high intelligence, but operates on a different wavelength. What do you think needs to change about education fundamentally?
More for special needs children or for the wider population?
Well, just acknowledging that there are so many different ways that people learn. How do you accommodate that?
Yeah, I think I'll tell. So one fairly obvious point is, right, the the world is changing unbelievably quickly today. I think everyone would agree with that. If you dug someone up who died 250 years ago and you showed them the world we're in today, they would literally die immediately of shock unless you dug them up and put them in a school. Because actually the curriculum and the way the curriculum is taught to children hasn't changed in tens, if not hundreds of years, and that is ridiculous. The notion of, or idea of an adult sitting in the front of a classroom and preaching and talking to 20 or 30 children who are going to write down the notes like good little people, that's just not how people learn. It's not how my children learn. It's not how it's not what people want to do, and the education system just hasn't evolved because schools and parents and children measure their success in the same old way, which is, did you pass your exams? Did you get what you needed? And then you go into the really emotional stories about the children who have different needs. And, there's a story I'll tell you about, and I was speaking to one of the mothers of a child that's one of our special needs schools, and he's severely autistic, very bright individual, and was really struggling in mainstream school, like really struggling. And he went from, and this happened when he was about aged 11, which is relatively normal, and suddenly he felt excluded and he wasn't fitting in and he didn't feel comfortable, and he was getting bullied, and then he just wouldn't go to school, but he didn't want to tell his mum, so he'd just go off somewhere during the day and come back, and eventually she found out, and this was really difficult. She's a single parent, she works at the checkout, one of the supermarkets. Taking that child out of his normal school that he was in and getting him into a special needs school and going through that process and filling all the forms and getting the grants and everything else took 2.5, 3 years. During that period, her son was upstairs. At one point, she went upstairs at home and she saw blood on the stairs. And she thought, well, what's happened there? And what had happened, her son had gone into the bathroom. He'd self-harmed using a protractor. And so she's speaking to the psychologist and said, what should I do? And they said, well, don't take the protractor off him, because if you do, he might go and use something that's sharp. He might go and use a knife. Right, and that was her reality for years, on her own, trying to deal with this, because the system isn't set up to help her. Now he's in the school. You talk to him and say, what do you think about the school? And he genuinely glows about his school and the opportunity it's given him and his future in education and going to university. And you talk to them now and you go, oh my goodness, that is the impact that school has had on him and his family. And that, to me, is the special bit about business. If you can get that bit right, and at the moment, Aurora has 1,600 children at school, has about 1,600 teachers, to give you an idea of the needs of these children. That's quite narrow. It's a very deep impact, but very narrow. The opportunity is, how can we build something which has 100, 1,000 times the scale as that? That would be remarkable. But, you speak to children now leaving university, they're not equipped for the life they're going into. What do you get when you hire a graduate? You get someone with a big IQ normally, who's learnt in a certain kind of way and had their hand held. I don't get what I'm looking for. I want some grr. I want some Street Fighter. I want people who have learned some hard lessons. And that normally doesn't come out of formal, structured education.
I mean, that hits very close to home. I wasn't expecting that from the conversation. Yeah, you talked about the process of getting support and getting EHCPs in place, which, for anyone that doesn't know, is an educational healthcare plan. My wife is a solicitor, and if she was not a solicitor, would she have accomplished that for our children? I would argue not. And again, that social isolation when people just exist on a slightly different bandwidth is a very pressing, it's something that I live with, of a parent of an autistic child every single day. So Octopus always invest very much on long-term windows, whereas, venture capital, private equity as standard business models, they exist on very fixed windows. I don't think I need to ask the question why, because I think you've kind of answered that already. But how have you managed to operate in a system that can often be kind of very short-termist? How were you given the latitude? How did you negotiate the latitude to build the business in that way?
By accident, actually. So right at the very beginning, it's great when you talk to entrepreneurs right at the start of their journey and they go, I had this big mission from day one. And maybe if you've built a business before and you have a lot of financial security, you can talk about that quite openly and quite genuinely. When we set Octopus up, there were three of us. We were 24, 25 and 26. We literally knew nothing. We went from working in a nice protected environment, a company called Mercury Asset Management, now part of BlackRock, where everything was done for you. There were Monets on the wall, Picassos on the wall, carpet thick enough to lose your shoes in. There was literally a butler bringing you teas and coffees. And then you go into the real world and you start your own company. And I remember, I had a conversation with a venture capitalist about would his firm like to invest in Octopus? And it's really difficult to get through to venture capitalists when you call them up, was my experience. And he'd come across from the States to set up the business in London. And he was the only person in the office, so he answered the phone, which was a mistake. And so I sold him Octopus. He said, that sounds really interesting. So I sent him the information through, and then I hounded him over the next how many weeks until eventually I called him and I said, it's Simon calling from Octopus. Have you had a chance to look at the information I sent? He said, you again. And I said, yeah, it's me again. Have you had a chance to look? And he said, listen very carefully. He said, are you listening? I said, yeah, I'm listening. And then there was a noise down the phone between. He said, did you hear that? I said, yeah, I heard that. What was that? He says, that's your business plan. I've shredded it. Never call me again. Right? That is my experience of dealing with the venture capital industry 25 years ago. So we couldn't raise money because we didn't know anything at the time. So we did what seemed quite logical to us at the time. We used the Yellow Pages. The Yellow Pages, for really young people, is a phone directory, right? You probably know it's a phone directory. Over 9 months, we cold called 15,000 people out of the Yellow Pages, and we raised money from 84 people. That's how bad we were at cold calling. Those are the odds. But that gave us the £2.25 million we needed to set the company up. We've never raised any money outside of that. We've invested £600 million over the course of Octopus so far, but that was off the back of £2.25 million we raised right at the very beginning. And because we'd raised money from individuals and they weren't sitting on our board and they didn't have any rights, everyone owned the same ordinary shares as everyone else, we have been given the ability to run the business as we want. So we've built a group which has financial services businesses within it, an energy business within it, a special needs school business in it, and a whole bunch of not yet invented businesses to come in the future, because I do not have a time horizon which is measured in quarters or years or cycles which are too short. Right? You cannot build a remarkable business over a 4, 5, 6, 7 year window. It's taken us 25 years to build this. Now, the lovely thing about this, Einstein used to talk about this, he said it was the eighth wonder of the world, is compounding, right? We've delivered 28% a year, not every year, not consistently, but on average, 28% return for 25 years in a row. That means we've made our investors about 360 times their money. And that is the benefit of taking a very long-term view. If you are really playing the long game, now listen to Buffett. What's the best holding period? Forever. Right? And that's what we want with Octopus. We want to build a business that outlives me and build a business where I look back and go, I'm really proud I was part of that. It's a really special company. And that makes me feel good. And that's selfishly why I do it. And if we can create a whole heap of wealth for people working there at the same time and change their lives and their families' lives, that would be amazing. But the way capital markets invest and the time horizon over which people measure success and are incentivized is 100% wrong. And that needs to change. And until that changes, you will get companies behaving in the wrong way because they measure success in timelines which are too short. And you can't invest really for the future when you do that. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, boiling that down into simple things is fascinating because it was 15,000 cold calls. Goodness me, even as a lifelong sales professional, that's eye-watering. But that bought you the ticket to run the business in the way that you wanted.
Yeah, and I say to founders all the time, I say, look, choose your, it's not a great analogy for someone who's divorced, but you choose your financial backer like you choose your life partner, if you get it right, because you need to share the same values. They need to pass the diary test. I think there's a great diary test, whether you're working with partners or companies or colleagues. If I look in my diary and I go, oh, I'm spending time with them, whether them is an organization or a person, then they either shouldn't work there or we shouldn't do business with them. And I think lots of times the relationship between the entrepreneur and the backer, the financial backer, there's a whole bunch of friction and sometimes not a whole heap of respect, because entrepreneurs tend to like other entrepreneurs because they've got the same scars and they understand. Oftentimes, especially in the UK, venture capitalists, private equity people, they haven't built a business before, right? So if I come along as a VC or a private equity firm and I bang you over the head as the entrepreneur saying, why have you missed your numbers? That's not what the business plan said. I know that, right? But the business plan is essentially an epic waste of paper, right? Because whatever you write in a business plan will never be true, right? It's better to assess the entrepreneur and work out how you can help them. How do you help an entrepreneur? You give them super talented people and you give them distribution. That's what every entrepreneur wants in every single sector at all times. Are venture capital firms, as a generalization, set up to do that? No. They're set up to hire really smart IQ people, right, who've been taught by an education system that failing is bad and quite embarrassing. That's not how to run a business, right? And people don't get scared about the fear of failure, actually. It's a sense of embarrassment that comes with it. That's the really dangerous bit. That's what needs to be knocked out of a culture, an organization, especially as it scales and gets bigger, because that stops you from taking risk. It stops you from building the next thing.
And one of the things that I've observed in having worked for VC-backed businesses is it creates a reality distortion field where actually between entrepreneur and funder, acknowledgement that they're not being truthful with each other. Like the entrepreneur is saying, yeah, I'll deliver 700% in 1 year. And that's the basis on which the relationship starts. It's all false.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I back businesses personally, I invest in my own capital, I just back the individual. Right? You can show me a business plan if you want to. We can talk about it. But whatever numbers are in that business plan will probably show the fastest growing company in the world ever. And that's never reality. So what do I really want to know? I want to know what kind of person you are. I want to know whether you have resilience. I want to know whether you have humility. I want to know whether you're going to be open. And I want to know whether you have that street fighter and that grr. If I look at all the people within Octopus, within the group, who've been super, super successful, probably the number one factor is how busy a life they choose to lead. And it will not have changed since they were 7 years old. So it's because there are certain people on a spectrum of humans where there are certain people who just can't help themselves. They literally will not stop, whatever they're choosing to do in life. And hard work is directly correlated to success. Doesn't make me very fashionable saying that, but it's true. And I need people who are prepared to make that sacrifice because it's something they love. And so you must do, I tell my kids all the time, just find what you love in life and do that. And then it won't seem like work. And the whole notion of work-life balance is a nonsense. Just find something you love and then it won't seem like work. And if the problem is you need balance all the time, you're in the wrong job. Go and change your job. You only get one shot at this. And again, not a very fashionable thing to say, but I think it's true.
Yeah. So there's a few things I'd love to talk about that. I mean, you are a triathlete. You've done Ironmans. So that's important. Your physical health, you run a business, you've got 3 kids. I'll assume that you're kind of present for your kids quite a lot. That's quite a lot to juggle. I mean, how do you choose to balance that? Have you managed to maintain equilibrium throughout all of the 20 years? Is it something that you've managed to get control of later? I'd just love to hear your perspective on balance, however you want to interpret that.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's really difficult. It's really, being really honest. So I send a Friday update out every week to everyone in the company, and I write about personal things. And a couple of weeks ago, I wrote about regret. And I wrote about regret because the best people to talk to about regret are old people. And old people will tell you, you regret what you didn't do rather than what you did do. And that's probably right. But I think everyone has some form of regret sometimes. A couple of my regrets is, I don't think I'm it's getting a bit personal, but I think I'm a great friend. I'm a brilliant friend if something really bad happens to you, because I'll be there in a heartbeat and I'm really good at problem solving. But as a general rule of thumb, in terms of I'm busy, and it's a really easy thing to say, I'm too busy. Entrepreneurs say it all the time, right? Do I look after myself as well as I should look after myself? No, I don't, right? And as you get older and older and you go, I should probably have done more of that. And that's a choice. And you have conversations like this and you make it open, you think, right, okay, now's the time to actually do something about that. So I don't think I've got that balance. It's not been brilliant. There's only one thing, maybe it's slightly more than one thing, but the only real thing I do when my brain switches off is I play golf. I love playing golf. When I play golf, I just think about playing golf. Almost all the other time, my brain is ticking. My brain ticks when I go to bed. I go to bed with problems to do with work, and I'll wake up at some ungodly hour, and my brain will have thought about it, and my brain will have come up with ideas. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's like a muscle. And entrepreneurs create this muscle about business creation and problem solving, which is just unreal, because that's what they spend every single hour of every day doing. And once you've done it for 25 years, you literally can't help it. I'm quite an intense person. I'm wired a certain kind of way. So you just have to be aware of it. Then, my children live with me, 23, one's 19, one's 16. And it's getting that balance right and making sure that I'm there for them as much as I can do. But clearly, I have a job. The Octopus is quite a big company now. And so that's a constant source of, am I getting that balance right? And you try to, and sometimes you get stuff wrong, and that's okay, as long as you can have the conversation and someone can hold the mirror up every now and again and go, come on, you're not quite getting this right.
One of my favourite sayings is, you can have anything that you want, you just can't have everything that you want. And you can lean up your life in certain areas. You don't watch the Netflix box set or, the trivialities, but there's only so much far you can cut that before you go into something else that is important. And you have to just acknowledge there is a tension between them and pick.
Yes. And actually, the scarcest resource for anyone, it's the same point, is time. Right, so when people say, how are you spending your time, especially as organisations get larger, and you can just do the diary test on people. Just come and show me your diary for the last week, and you look at them, and these people, they are in meetings 60 or 70% of the time. What are you doing, right? Because the company's great. I wasn't at meetings when I first set Octopus up out of necessity, right? You've got a burning platform. You're going to run out of money. The company will die, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to fight really hard to make sure it doesn't. And as organizations scale, you end up not running on a daily cycle, not even a weekly cycle. You can end up running on a monthly cycle. And it's the entrepreneur's job to stop that from happening and try and create the urgency and excitement and passion of a startup in a much, much larger organization. That's a challenge, but if you get it right, it's super cool.
So you talked about the things that you look for in the people that you invest in, but what about the people they hire within their businesses? Because it's a lot, that level of commitment permeated throughout the whole business is difficult. If I take two examples, Elon Musk, completely unapologetic, we're building a space rocket, you're not going to see your kids for a month. Or a Nick Storonsky from Revolut who said, I don't have time for hello. I think he insinuated that weaklings have manners. These are very, very intense characters, and they only hire intense characters. Do you expect the people that you hire to hire those same properties in the same levels beneath them, or are you a little bit more malleable with what their organisation should look like?
So I don't agree with either of those two comments. I don't think I'd build a business I was particularly proud of, or a culture I was particularly proud of. So for me, when I think of what makes a business great, but great businesses are simply about how they make people feel. And those people are the people working there, the employees, or the customers. If I speak to my children and say, what kind of company do you want to work for? They'll tell me they want to work for a good company. Right? A good company, at the very basics, would say hello or goodbye or thank you or sorry. Right? So, if I ask you a question, tell me a time when a company has been kind to you, right? You probably can't answer it. That's a bit depressing. So, what would I like Octopus companies to be? I'd like them to be kind. I'd like people to talk about us like they talk about their best friend. I'd like to imagine if Octopus, the company, was a person, they go, yeah, I'd be friends with them. They're brilliant. They're really good. Right? And that, I think, will build a really valuable company and a company I'm really proud of. So that's our culture. That's our DNA. But that doesn't mean you can't be intense. It doesn't mean you can't be really competitive. It doesn't mean you can't want to win. It doesn't mean I don't want to take other people's customers off them. All those things are very true, but I want to do it in a way when I look back when I'm really old and I hang my boots up and I go, yeah, I built that. I was part of building that, and it's really special because of how it makes people feel. That is a part of business that people don't talk about, right? People will talk about outpricing, outsmarting, outmaneuvering, beating up, whatever it is. I'll never be the fastest, the smartest, or the best, but I bet you I can behave better than everyone else. And that's the bit people remember. People remember human stories and how you made them feel, right? And if you can do that as a business, you will win. And I know not everyone shares that view, and these are very, very successful entrepreneurs you're talking about. I just have a different approach. I'd like to build a different kind of company.
You've often referred to yourself as the chief antibody. You said, the best culture you had was when it was 30 people. And I've worked in companies of that size, and it's magic. How do you protect the culture that you've created as you get to scale in hundreds?
Yeah, I think it gives them context. So absolutely, I've said that. And I think it's a helpful analogy for people, which is, when you're 30 people, we were based above a Costco supermarket in Farringdon, right? And we had 30 people. It was all open plan. Everyone knew everything that was going on without any formal method of communication. Everyone knew what was important to me and to the wider team. When you're 30 people, you can be quite command and control because it works at that level in a way it doesn't work when you're even 100 people, let alone 12, 13,000 people. It works really well and they can see that. So how do you get that bit right? You have to hire the right kind of people. So I interviewed the first 600 people we hired and I got a whole bunch of people wrong. But now I'm pretty good at interviewing because actually I care more about your values and your behaviors, your how, that's our shorthand for the how, rather than your what. Your what is your functional expertise. I can hire a bunch of people with massive IQs who are really functionally capable. I can hire very few people who share our values and behave in a certain kind of way. And that is non-negotiable. And that flows through into how we assess people, how we pay people, how we promote people. And when that becomes part of your DNA and your culture, then it survives. And the chief antibody bit is if the culture was best when it was 30 people, my job is to make sure that the gradient of decline in that culture between 30 people and 10,000 people is as shallow as possible, right? Because you can't recreate the culture you had when you were 30 people, but you can recognize what was important. It's just down to behaviors and values of the people you have in the business and who you hold up and say, you know, he or she was amazing because of what they did and normally how they behaved. It's about storytelling. It's about bringing it to life. It's about empowering the right people. And when you get people wrong, and even if you're really good at recruitment, 20, 30% of the people you hire will be wrong. Well, then they shouldn't stay in the company because it's bad for them. It's bad for you. It's bad for the organization. But again, people are reluctant to have that conversation because it's uncomfortable.
So talk really about what I would describe as codifying those values. How do you hire for that? I mean, you've got things like the big 5 personality traits and IQs and, you know, what tests do you administer that don't rely on Simon Rogerson being in the room?
Well, so, you know, I've hired everyone who works on our HR recruitment team. I've hired and interviewed, so they've been through the process and we'll run role plays and we'll keep doing it all the time, and I will still interview people at a certain level within the business. But for me, I'll come back to the same things. Number one factor in what makes someone successful at Octopus, how busy a life they naturally choose to lead. So I start there. I want to understand the person and the motivations and how they're wired on the human spectrum. So do they have it within themselves to work really, really hard and to love it? And are they genuinely passionate about that? And it's about the questions you ask, right? Smart people know how to answer pretty much any question you throw at them in an interview because they've thought about it and their brains work really quickly. If you ask them a question they're not expecting to get asked, right? So tell me something about you that makes you vulnerable that you wouldn't normally share in an interview. That's a good question. It's a good question because it's going to tell me all about you. I get one of 3 answers. I get, I'm not answering that question because they don't want to. That's okay. But you probably won't work at Octopus. Or I'll get a false negative, which is sometimes I'm a bit of a perfectionist, right? That one's out the window too. Or I'll get a genuinely human answer, which is, you know, everyone has their own issues and problems and life's sometimes really difficult. And if they're open and willing to share that, they're going to make a really different kind of team member because that's what creates human relationships. That's what creates trust. And humans are, you know, all of us are a bit flawed in some way, but it's about recognizing that and having that openness of conversation. And you can do that in an interview and you can test how quickly people think. And depending on the answers you get, you can just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And because I've done it literally thousands and thousands and thousands of times, I can work out normally within 10, 15 minutes if someone's going to be good. And when you meet the people who are remarkable, you know in under 5 minutes. In 25 years, I've probably met less than 10 of them. But when you meet those people, it's like, oh my goodness. Greg, for example, the guy that runs our energy business, was one of those people. I knew within 5 minutes. Total, in a good way, total freak of a human.
One of the other things that you've talked about is, I think you've actually quoted Buddha, the focus on the excitement of change, not the pain. That's a great value to live towards, but I think it's probably something that's hard every single day, even after doing it. Yep. Can you give us an example of like an uncomfortable change that you had to make recently, and maybe one that, you know, didn't make as quickly as you could have in retrospect?
This is personally to do with me or to do with the business, or it doesn't matter?
Either, yeah.
I just talk about the one that pops into my head first, right? It's a therapy session. So I got divorced 2.5, 3 years ago. We didn't make each other very happy. We're quite different people. But oh my goodness, is that a difficult process, right? Your wife's a solicitor, going through that process. And because humans don't like change, right? Organizations don't like change. Humans don't like change. And when you come out the other side, hopefully it's better for everyone, right? Because if you're not making each other happy, then you shouldn't stay together. And you should do it in the nicest way possible and have that conversation and everything else. And when there are children involved, it makes it even more difficult because you've got relationships there, and how do you balance all that kind of stuff? And your mind goes a bit nuts before, and how do you tell the children? That's really, really difficult. And, and we have a business called Amicable now, which we acquired after all this happened, which allows people to separate without using lawyers. And they've done more consent orders now than any law firm in the UK. And that's really important to me, because when they do the analysis, the worst thing that can happen to a human is a loved one dying. The second worst thing that can happen to a human is the process of divorce. And the third worst thing is being diagnosed with a terminal illness. So divorce is worse than being told you have stage 4 cancer. And it's really bad for you. So how do you deal with that, right? You recognize it's a process, and you're going to come out the other side, and you try as much as possible next to get drawn into what becomes a very acrimonious process. And when lawyers are involved and they're kind of encouraged to do it, they have a totally different incentive. And for me, because we've got Octopus, I can think, well, how can I stop other people going through the process that I went through? Well, I can take the lawyers out of the equation, and I can try and make sure that people do it in a much more human way, right? So there are a whole bunch of stuff in that where it's really difficult, it's really personal, it's emotional. And there are all kinds of things to do with business which are exactly the same. When you try and reinvent a business that's quite old, and you're trying to do things very differently, and you're trying to build new businesses, and you build them outside the mothership, and people look at it and go, oh, I really want to get involved in that. And you're like, no, you can't, because we're going to build it over there in a different building, and we're going to do things very differently, because the world's different today than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's difficult too. Yeah, but again, it's a muscle, and the more you get used to change and the more you're able to talk about it, the easier it becomes. But it's scary for people. Most people do not like change.
Thank you for sharing that very personal example. And the one thing I'm thinking is, it's so difficult because there are these components of yours or anyone's personality. There's the part of you that fights for excellence and know that it hasn't easy, and the part in your particular example of knowing when to let go and doing it in the best possible way. And I think the same is said from your example of hiring people. You still get 30% wrong, and you just face into that.
Yeah, and also, lots of entrepreneurs will say, like, perfect is the enemy of good. If you are one of those people where everything has to be perfect, and you spend, and certainly when we first set Octopus up, I used to stress about copy. I have a degree in French. I have an arts degree. I like language. I like writing. I'm all right at it. I used to stress about the copy and all these things. It's just not that relevant. Actually, you don't need to be all over everything. You need to work out where your points of leverage are. And as the business grows and develops, you realize your role's slightly different, right? Yeah. And here's one for you. I'm 50 years old now. I reckon my brain probably worked best from an IQ and a processing standpoint when I was maybe late 20s, 30, and that's probably true for everybody, right? And then your brain isn't able to process things as quickly. But then I have a different kind of intelligence now, which is a situational intelligence, right? I've experienced so much stuff and got so much stuff wrong that I know how to apply the intelligence I have way better than I did when I was 20, 25, 30. So it's just recognizing where I'm most useful now, coaching other people, right? So you get the right people running the businesses across the group, and I can help them, and I can hopefully bring the best out in them, and I can help them avoid some of the mistakes and the pitfalls I struggle with. But actually my raw processing power, my raw ability is not as good as it was 15 years ago. I have to write things down now. I used to remember everything all the time, like where it was on a page. Now I'm like, oh God damn it, I've done it again. Not intentionally. I have to write on my computer in meetings. I'm like, Simon, this is embarrassing. But it's just, I'm 50.
You had a brilliant example of parking tickets, I think, recently.
Yeah, honestly, it's so embarrassing. That's the most annoying thing. I use Apple Pay now, but you park your car, you go in there, you put it all in, you say yes, you go on to this. But Lloyds Bank, I park in the same place every day. I have done for ages. Every single time, Lloyds wants me to verify that it's actually me asking to pay the same parking every day. I mean, why is this going on? And then I forget to go back into the parking app. So I've paid for it, I've approved it, and then I don't go back into the parking app, and then I come home, and there's a big yellow poster on my windscreen. Simon, bad.
And when you talked about having a busy mind, you're solving big problems, and unfortunately sometimes the little ones.
Yeah, I do, and they needle, and they annoy. I was so funny, because I get in the car, it irritates me so much, I have to pay the parking fine before I start the car, because if I take it back home and I'm still thinking about it, that's bad for me.
I did the first one, and I sent them a very nice letter asking them for them to be lenient, and they did. And then the second one, I just took it on the chin, because I was so angry with myself that I'd done it again in a short space of time that I felt like I needed to be punished.
Yeah, well, no, good for you, right? I've tried once. I parked slightly outside the white lines and I got a parking ticket for that. And I'm like, really? That just seems a bit anyway.
It's still with you.
You wouldn't be friends with a car park operator. If that company was a person, I definitely wouldn't be friends with them. They're not very nice.
There's a new business opportunity. You've got education, yeah, and you're going to revolutionise car parking, make it a good industry. So I don't think any conversation would be complete without talking about AI. I'm sorry if I feel I need to apologise in advance for that, but if you look specifically at Octopus and those industries that we've talked about, which areas do you think, oh God, we might get disrupted here? And where do you think, wow, it might be an incredible multiplier for the things that we're already working on? How do you see AI?
So, lots of people talk about AI and they say, like, it's the next industrial revolution. And I think they're totally right. The difference is most industrial revolutions have happened over decades, probably. This is happening weeks, months, days. It's frightening. So I think about a place within the group where AI has disrupted others, and then maybe an opportunity where I could disrupt a whole industry. And so when I think about it, like those two things, and it's normally the businesses of massive scale, and the business with the most scale in our group is Octopus Energy. Octopus Energy has 7.5-8 million customers in the UK, and I don't know what the time period was. A little while ago, a few years ago, we were not using AI, enabling us to do what we need to do for the customer, and then we started using it in the space of, and it's called Magic Ink. You think, like, kind of clearly because of the octopus. We started using it in March. Within something like 4 or 5 months, AI was answering 70% of customer queries. And those customers were happier than the customers who were not using AI. Now, what you really want is you want AI removing all the friction, making it seamless, making a great customer experience, and then the human and the actual customer agent bit sitting on top of it, where actually it makes their job a million times better. They can be the sprinkles of magic for customers where they come out as massive apostles going, oh my God, that's been amazing. But actually just the processing power and the ability to systemize some of this stuff is just frightening. And if you have a business which is fundamentally a technology business, so Kraken, the platform that's being built, that runs ours, it runs E.ON, it runs EDF, it runs Tokyo Gas, Origin Energy, great big firms, 70 million accounts. That's how it operates. So AI is at its heart, and it will continue to do that, not just in the energy industry. It's doing it in the water industry now. We'll do it in other industries going forward. And, Kraken now, I think, processes about 2% of entire UK GDP. The scale of it is enormous. And I see that happening and I go, oh my goodness, that's amazing what it can do. And it's in conjunction with the humans rather than the humans. The other bit where I think there's an opportunity to massively disrupt an industry, you take the industry which is probably as antiquated as any industry, take the legal industry. So the legal industry, they'll still insist on wet signatures, and we have to do things this way. And the language, just out of necessity and precision or whatever it is, the language that law firms use and how they operate and how they think, that will be the last industry in the world to engage and operate with technology, because just how that industry works. That industry does not like change, and the individuals within it do not like change. Their brains operate in a certain kind of way normally. Right, and we have a wills business. We have Octopus Legacy, and that does wills and it does probate, and probate can be automated, and the experience for people is really painful and it's too expensive and it's not very nice. And in Octopus Legacy, I think we have the business where you can start to look at natural language search when you have 2, 3, 4, 500,000 wills and you're going, what are the needs of all these customers? Just read all of them and come back and tell me and rank order them in it. What can I do for these customers that will make their lives easier, better? And here are the parameters I'm setting. Instant. There you go. And it learns all the time, right? So I think about opportunity for disruption, and I think about the person, Sam, who set that business up, Sam Grice, who set that business up, and he's running it, and his engagement in it, he could not be more excited, right? And this is an entrepreneur who gets it, understands it, is using it at every opportunity, operating within an industry which is not quite quill and a pot of ink, but it's not far off it. And that is the opportunity. That will be giant, giant disruption, because it's just fundamentally better for the people working in the business and for the customers. And you'll build better products. And it's not like, is AI here to stay or not? Of course it is. And it's going to radically transform industries, roles, jobs, businesses. And, anyone running a business now will go, yeah, I need to be at the forefront of that. It's really difficult when you have businesses that are very hierarchical. Partnerships, who are the people running them? Normally white men of a certain age. Are they technologists? No. How many software people do you have sitting in the partnership of one of the great big law firms? Probably not very many.
And it's a knowledge-based industry as well, in the same way that medicine is maybe a little bit more protected.
Yeah, I think there's a funny one, because I think there's lots of parallels actually between I get nervous before I go and see the GP, because I'll go on Google and I'll diagnose myself with something that I don't have. And I'll go and see my GP and she'll reassure me and I go, oh, thanks very much. She could, if she wanted to be the traditional version of doctors and medicine, she could tell me what's wrong with me using a Latin terminology, right? Because that's where it came from and doctors, but she doesn't, right? She has empathy and she understanding. She talks to me as a real human. Right. But technology can do a whole bunch of the stuff. When I go and get a scan, I want AI to look at my imaging and everything else and compare it to everyone else and tell me this is probably what's wrong with me. Right. I don't want a human doing it. I want AI doing it because it will do it way, way quicker and way more accurately. The same thing is true in financial services, right? The financial services industry, what you want is you want that relationship with the equivalent of your GP, of your doctor. I want my financial advisor to do that for me. I want to use machines and technology to do all the heavy lifting and remove all the friction. Then want a human to do the empathy and the understanding and to encourage me to live my life in a certain way and to get the most out of it. That, when you combine both of those two things together, it's really cool. Medicine's going to do it. Financial services will ultimately do it. But all these industries are. And it's really difficult for some of the incumbents to recognize the amount of change that is required. It's way easier to build from new than it is to try and transform an existing giant business. So unbelievably hard to do. Wrong culture, wrong people, wrong systems, wrong everything else. It's like a big company hiring a head of innovation. Just resign before you start. It's like you've got a whole organization fighting you with whole departments telling me you can't do stuff. You need protecting. You need to go and build it from a different building and benefit from all the great things that large organization has, normally distribution, but not get sucked into the way it operates, the treacle. But that's, very difficult for businesses to do because you've got to create your own platform, your own burning platform.
Just touch on the medical thing. Interesting. There was a meme I saw online, which is, 50 years ago, I went to see a doctor and he'd say, you've got a scratch on your knee, go home. Then Google came along and whatever I typed in, it told me I had cancer. And now AI is saying, you've got a scratch on your knee, go away. I have a relatively benign condition called cluster headache, and it's notoriously misdiagnosed, and it was the case for me. And ChatGPT got it right.
Yeah, that's what's remarkable. And actually, this is the start of the amazing thing is every day, every week, every month, if we go to sleep now and wake up in a year, you'll be like, oh my goodness, the amount of change that's happened. And that is the bit that's so difficult to get into the heads of some people, the incumbents, the people who've been running very large organizations for a very long time. The reality today is radically different, right? If you don't have the people around your management team who are at the forefront of that, who really understand it and can drive it, you'll wake up. Businesses are growing or they're dying at a faster rate than ever before. So if you own a great big incumbent, my goodness, set it on fire yourself because it's pretty much ablaze already because customers will move like that. And, AI technology is one of the big enablers and the massive disruptors. And I think the world will look very different. And I hope the companies that emerge the other side as the big dominant companies, I hope they're going to be companies which are kind and they do things in the right way because business done right is the way you solve the world's problems. And, not many people take the step back and go, do you know what? What is it? It's got all the human capital, all the financial capital. And that's how we should think about business. But it's very different to the businesses we're surrounded by today.
One thing that's interesting to me is the effect of AI on sales, because when you automate something, you reduce the incremental cost of doing it to effectively zero, and it floods the channel. Email, now you've got LinkedIn automation. It's killing it because there's no care or soul behind any of it. So, that's one of the bits that I worry about.
Yeah, but I think it's the idea. It's the combination of both bits, right? So you will do business with people normally, with people you like, who share your values and everything else. I don't think that's going to change. It's just technology can do the heavy lifting, and sometimes it gets it right, and sometimes it automates too much of that process. But actually, there's a whole brain there that will just make you way, way more efficient as an organization, as a salesperson, everything else. But fundamentally, especially in the world of financial services, do business with people who you like, who you look in the eye and say, amazing, that's what we're going to do together. So yeah, I recognize it will change things, but hopefully the fundamental about business and trust and relationships won't ever change.
So my final question, Simon, is, customer centricity is a theme that's gone through everything we talked about. What's the most unexpected insight one of your group companies has got from talking to the market? Because you build a business on an underlying hypothesis, we think this, and sometimes you get that confirmed and sometimes you get something very different. back?
Yeah, I think I'd probably say right at the very beginning of Octopus's life. So I went from university, got a French degree, went to St Andrews, largely to play golf, but also to get a French degree. Then I joined Mercury and I was working in financial services. And I remember because I had to write some of the reports, the weekly reports, the monthly reports that went out to clients. And you'd write about macroeconomics, you write about what was going on in the economy or what was going on in the market. And I talk about GDP, or I talk about inflation, I talk about interest rates, I talk about macroeconomics, pair trading, alpha, all these terminology, because that's the environment I was in. And then at some point over those 2.5 years, I was there for 2.5 years and then resigned. And you go, why am I actually writing all of this? Right? This is a bit like the doctor talking to me in Latin. If you go and talk to normal people about money and their money, and you say, can you tell me what alpha is, or what pair trading is, or what macroeconomics is, or interest rates, or inflation? I'm not being horrible. Most of the population is financially illiterate, right? They don't know. What they want is they want to live a certain kind of life, and money can either enable that or not. And what you want is some help. But I can't trust you if I don't understand you. And this is the problem, one of the biggest problems in financial services. And I'd sit there and I think, are we doing this because someone's trying to obfuscate what's really going on? Or are they doing it because they want to seem clever and I want to feel different to everyone else? I don't like relationships which are not on par. I don't like someone talking to me like I'm a child and they're the adult because of words they know or terminology they know. So for me, demystifying that and talking to humans in very simple language is that we have something called the granny and granddad test. If anything leaves the building and would not be understood by a granny or granddad who's never worked in energy, financial services, education, it can't go out the building. Because why would I want to do that, right? Apple made beautiful products that, frankly, don't need an instruction manual because it's just intuitive, right? They changed the whole way people thought about technology. 30 years ago, if I couldn't use a bit of technology, that was my fault, right? Because I'm a Luddite and I don't know what I'm doing. Now, if I can't use technology, I assume the technology is crap, right? Because Apple changed my whole perception and relationship with technology. Where is the equivalent of that in financial services? Who's making my life so unbelievably easy that they get me and they understand me? And when you talk to people about money or ask them to draw money, they don't draw a graph or GDP or stuff like that. They draw a wedding or a holiday or a house or something and do that. Relate to me in life terms, right? That's the biggest lesson. If you want customer centricity around financial services, it's about the life, it's about the language you use, it's about how you converse in a way that is not industry jargon, not the same as everyone else. That is such a nonsense. And when you stand back and you go, like, how much value are they adding by trying to predict where the economy is going? There was a great quote by an economist called Galbraith, who said the only point of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable. And that's what all these organizations are spending all their time doing, right? Writing about macroeconomics and where the market's going. You don't have a clue, literally, and the customer is not interested. What they're interested in is how can they live the life they want to live for them and their family. And that requires a very different approach and a very different kind of relationship, and language and communication is at the heart of that.
Yeah, I think particularly in financial services that rings true. And like wealth management, it was almost, if you worked hard and you got up to the point where you could have a financial advisor, you then needed to go and do a course to understand the language that they were going to be using. And everywhere, it creates an incredibly high barrier to entry for normal people.
And just unnecessary stress, right? Don't talk to me in those terms because that's not very nice. And because of the different companies that emerge, I don't have the time, the patience, or the inclination to deal with anyone or any company that makes my life any more complicated anymore. And financial services should be no different. So if you can't speak to me in terms I immediately understand and want to engage with, then I just won't do business with you. And that should be the bar. That's a good bar. So make things really easy, engage in the way the client wants to engage, helping them live the lives they want. Which is why we have a business looking at probate and wills and death, and why we have a business looking at divorce, because they are the two biggest life events that happen to people. And we can help you through that, and we can help you navigate. And there are all kinds of implications from a monetary standpoint of doing that. But that's where people want to start the conversation. That's the stuff they want to talk about, because that's the reason they come to you, right? They don't come to you thinking, do you know what? I'd really like to make 7.5% return, net return, by investing my pension in XYZ. They go, no. I want to go on holiday, I want to buy that house, I'm getting divorced, or someone's died. Help me with all of that, right? Or I'm going to retire, and how I'm going to live my retirement.
Final question. It's just dawned on me how unusual these businesses that you're investing in are. Do you go looking for them, or do they come to you by virtue of the fact that Octopus is is known for that type of investing?
I think a bit of both, right? So we have a ventures business that invests in lots of other people's companies. We've got a portfolio of 200 companies. When we're building businesses as Octopus, as ourselves on the balance sheet, then it's looking at education, financial services in its broadest sense, and energy. And when you think about financial services, what we're talking about at the moment, it's about life events, right? Because I don't think people want to engage in financial services about monetary terms and everything else. It's life events. And then you go experience some of these yourself. My dad died a few years ago. Oh my goodness, that process was painful in terms of wills and probate and everything else. That's broken. Oh my goodness, there's a company that's trying to fix it. Amazing. You get divorced, you go through that process. You're not going to forget that in a hurry, right? I'd love other people not to have to go through that and say, we've got another business. And then you think about retirement, or you think about mortgages. You think about all the life events where people go, oh my goodness, it would be helpful if someone could be by my side and help me through that process. And so we think about them, and then we go looking for the right entrepreneur in most cases. But now the Octopus brand is pretty well known. So lots of people will come to us. And because we have, in the UK, whatever, million customers or so, there's real power. And in 2014, I started in 2014, we had about 50,000 clients at the time. And it was our annual offsite. So our vision is Octopus in every home. And I was like, what are you talking about? Right, and Octopus in every home would be a brilliant vision, right? Because it's both a numerical target, there are 25 million homes in the UK, but also how you make someone feel. To be welcomed into someone's home, you need to behave in a certain kind of way. And I think broadly, in the last 10 years, we've achieved that, right? We now have pretty much everyone knows who Octopus is. They all think we're just an energy company. Hopefully that will change, right? Hopefully we get to a stage where it's Octopuses in every home, because there'll be other brands in there, because we have permission. Because I don't just want Octopus to be famous. I want Octopus to be famous for something. I'd really like that to be, we're an innovative, smart company. I'd like it to be kindness. I'd like people to think of Octopus and go, do you know what? It's a really kind company, and they get things right. And when they get things wrong, they'll apologize, right? We're not going to be the company that says, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry, but they'll just say, I'm sorry. Here's what happened. Here's what we're going to do about it. And we'll try very hard not to do it again. It's human. People forgive you. Almost everyone will forgive you when you do that. Everyone's going to make mistakes. But I think the human element, people have lost that in business. It's a big shame.
We could certainly do with more kindness in the world. Simon, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.